The diplomatic station hung in the darkness of space like a great silver flower. Its petals were docking bays and observation decks, and at its center was the grand hall where species met to talk and trade and learn about each other. The station orbited a planet of vast forests and underground cities where the species had built their civilization over thousands of years. Counselor and stood at the main docking bay with his four arms folded behind his back. His compound eyes watched the approaching human vessel with great interest. The ship was called the Steady Hand, and it carried a small team of human marines as part of a new exchange program between their species. The collective had only recently made contact with humanity, and there was much to learn about these strange, soft creatures from a distant world. The ship docked with a gentle thump, and the airlock cycled open, and clicked his mandibles in the gesture of welcome as the humans stepped onto the station. Captain came first. She was a woman of average height with short brown hair and calm eyes. She wore a simple uniform and carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen many worlds. Behind her came 5 Marines in their full combat gear, and felt his antennae twitch with curiosity at the sight of them. The Marines were covered in equipment. Bulky vests wrapped around their torsos, and these vests seemed to have dozens of pouches and pockets and straps attached to every surface. The humans carried weapons on their hips and across their backs, and more pouches hung from their belts and thighs. They looked like they were wearing small buildings made of fabric and metal. "Welcome to station," N said, his translator device converting his clicking speech into human words. "I am Counselor N, and I will be your guide during this exchange." Captain smiled and shook his offered hand, a human custom they had learned to accept. "Thank you, Counselor. We're honored to be here. This is Sergeant Park, who leads our Marine detachment." Park stepped forward and nodded. He was a solid man with a serious face and eyes that seemed to notice everything around him. "Counselor," he said simply, and studied the sergeant's equipment with open fascination. They were known throughout the galaxy for their defensive technology. Their soldiers wore layered energy shields that could stop almost any weapon, and their military doctrine was built entirely around protection and survival. Looking at the human marine, and could not identify any shield generators or defensive systems at all. "If you will follow me," and said, "High Examiner is waiting to meet you. As part of our exchange program, he will be studying your military equipment. We believe that understanding how a species protects itself reveals much about their nature." Exchanged a glance with the woman beside him, a Marine named Lisa who carried even more pouches than the others. She was the unit's armorer, responsible for maintaining all their equipment. Lisa had a friendly face and quick hands that were always adjusting straps or checking gear. "Happy to show him whatever he wants to see," said. They walked through the station's corridors and noticed how the humans moved. They were alert and balanced, their heads turning to check corners and doorways even though they were in a safe diplomatic zone. Their hands never strayed far from their weapons. These were not diplomats, and realized. These were predators wearing the clothing of civilization. High Examiner waited in the analysis chamber, surrounded by scanning equipment and holographic displays. He was older than N, with a darker carapace and slower movements, but his compound eyes were sharp with intelligence. Had spent 40 years studying alien military technology, and he believed he could learn the soul of any species by examining how they chose to defend themselves. "Ah, the humans," said, moving forward on his 6 legs. "Welcome. I have been most eager to examine your protective systems. Our initial scans detected no energy shield signatures, which I assume means you use some form of physical armor. Fascinating. Most species abandon physical protection once they develop energy technology." Looked at Lisa and she shrugged. "We do use armor plates," she said. "Wanna see?" "Please," said, his mandibles clicking with excitement. Removed his tactical vest and handed it to the High Examiner. Took it with 2 of his arms while his other 2 hands activated scanning tools. He turned the vest over and over, his compound eyes examining every detail. "I do not understand," said slowly. "Where is the armor?" Lisa stepped closer and pointed. "Here and here. Ceramic plates front and back, stops most projectile rounds." Stared at her. "These small plates, they cover perhaps 15% of the torso. What about the rest? What about the limbs, the head?" "Helmet has some protection," said, "mostly for shrapnel and falls." "And the rest of this?" Gestured at the dozens of pouches covering the vest. "Surely these contain additional defensive systems, emergency shield generators, medical protection, hardening compounds. Lisa laughed and the sound made freeze in confusion. No, those are magazine pouches. That's where we keep our ammunition. Was silent for a long moment. His scanning tools hung forgotten in his hands. I must be misunderstanding your language. You are saying that most of this equipment is designed to carry weapons and ammunition rather than to protect the wearer. That's right, Lisa said. But this makes no sense. Defense is the foundation of survival. Without protection, your soldiers would be vulnerable to enemy fire. Scratched his jaw and seemed to consider how to explain. We figure the best way to not get shot is to make sure the other guy can't shoot. Hard to aim when someone's putting a lot of rounds in your direction. And watched struggle with this information. The High Examiner had studied hundreds of species, and all of them built their military equipment around the same basic idea: keep your soldiers alive long enough to win. The humans seem to have skipped that step entirely. Please, said, his voice strange and strained. Explain to me the defensive rating of this equipment. What percentage of incoming fire can it stop? Lisa looked at, and something passed between them. It might have been amusement or might have been pity. Examiner, Lisa said gently, I think there's been a misunderstanding. That's not armor. That's extra pockets for ammo. Stood very still. In the quiet analysis chamber, surrounded by the most advanced scanning technology in the collective, the High Examiner realized that everything he thought he knew about military philosophy might be wrong. Captain cleared her throat. Perhaps we should continue this discussion over a meal. I'm sure there's much our species can learn from each other. But did not move. He held the human vest in his hands and stared at its many pockets, and he wondered what kind of species would go to war carrying more weapons than protection. He wondered if humans were brave or foolish or something else entirely. In orbit high above, Commander received the preliminary report from. He read it twice and dismissed it as a joke. No species could be that reckless with the lives of their soldiers. Surely the humans were hiding their real defensive technology. He would learn the truth soon enough. The examination chamber had become a classroom, though High Examiner was not sure who was teaching whom. Lisa stood at the central table with human equipment spread out before her and moved around the display like a scientist studying some impossible creature. This is a standard plate carrier, Lisa said, holding up the vest had worn earlier. The plates go in these pockets here, front and back. The rest of the vest is designed for load bearing. We attach pouches based on what the mission needs. Pointed one of his 4 hands at a row of rectangular pouches on the front. And these. Magazine pouches. Each one holds 2 rifle magazines. That's 60 rounds per pouch, and most of us carry at least 4 pouches. Some carry 6. 240 to 360 rounds of ammunition, calculated, per soldier. Just in the vest pouches, Lisa said with a small smile. We also carry magazines on our belts, in our pants pockets, and in our packs. A typical combat load is around 300 rounds, but we can push that higher if we expect a long fight. Felt something close to vertigo. Soldiers carried perhaps 50 rounds of ammunition because their doctrine assumed battles would be short defensive actions, where shields did most of the work. The idea of carrying hundreds of rounds suggested something very different about human warfare. Show me the rest, said. Lisa nodded and began laying out more equipment. She showed him the chest rigs that some soldiers preferred, which sacrificed back protection for easier movement and more forward-mounted pouches. She showed him the belt systems with holsters for sidearms and additional magazine carriers. She showed him the helmet with its mounting points for lights and cameras and communication gear. Notice there's no shield generator, she said. No energy absorption systems. Just a shell to keep shrapnel out of your brain and some padding for when you fall down. This is insane, said softly. Your soldiers go into battle essentially unprotected. Not unprotected, Lisa said. Differently protected. See, we learned something a long time ago on our. Armor makes you slow. Shields make you confident. And slow, confident soldiers get flanked and surrounded and killed. She picked up a rifle magazine and held it up. This is protection. Every round in this magazine is a chance to end the fight before it ends you. Every second you spend shooting is a second the enemy spends hiding, and an enemy who is hiding is not shooting at you. Considered this. It was logical in a terrible way, but surely there is a balance, some protection combined with offensive capability. There is a balance, Lisa agreed. We've been finding it for thousands of years. Right now, the balance says that mobility and ammunition capacity matter more than armor weight. That might change if someone invents better armor. It's changed before. In another part of the station, Counselor and walked with Captain through the observation deck. The great windows showed the curve of the below, green and brown and blue under swirls of white cloud. Your High Examiner seems disturbed by what he's learning, said. He has spent his life studying how species defend themselves, and replied. He believed this knowledge revealed deep truths about their nature. Your people are challenging his assumptions. And what do you think our equipment reveals about us? And was quiet for a moment. His compound eyes watched the planet turn slowly beneath them. I think it reveals that your species does not expect to survive through protection. You expect to survive through aggression. It is a philosophy born of predators, not prey. Nodded slowly. We were prey once, a long time ago, before we learned to make tools and weapons. The things that hunted us were faster and stronger and had better natural armor. We survived by being more violent than they were. And this history shapes your military thinking even now. Everything shapes everything, said. We didn't choose to be predators. We became predators because the alternative was extinction. Now it's just who we are. And understood this in an abstract way. They had evolved differently. They were hive builders, creatures of cooperation and defense. When threats came, they retreated to their underground cities and waited behind walls of stone and later walls of energy. They survived by being impossible to reach, not by being dangerous to approach. I must tell you something, and said quietly. Our High Command views this exchange program as an opportunity to assess your military capabilities. They expected to find weaknesses they could exploit if relations between our species ever soured. Did not seem surprised, and instead they're finding that we don't think about warfare the way you do. Precisely, this concerns them more than weakness would. A species with weak defenses can be conquered. A species with no interest in defense at all is unpredictable. We have interest in defense, said. We just define it differently. For us, the best defensive strategy is making sure nobody wants to attack in the first place. Their conversation was interrupted by a priority alert on N's communication device. He read the message, and his antennae went rigid with alarm. Commander reports unknown vessels entering the system, he said. Multiple signatures. They are not responding to hails. His casual manner vanished instantly. Her eyes sharpened and her posture straightened. How many? 12 ships. Configuration matches the syndicate. Raiders. The worst in this sector. They have attacked this station before. Our defenses held, but the damage was significant. Was already moving toward the door. Get my people to a secure location and tell your commander we're willing to help. And hurried after her. Help how? You have only 6 soldiers. 6 soldiers with a lot of ammunition, said. Trust me, that matters more than you think. In the orbital command center, Commander watched the fleet approach on his tactical display. 12 ships, ranging from small attack craft to 2 medium cruisers. It was a substantial raiding force, larger than the last attack. The pirates were getting bolder. His communication officer relayed a message from Captain offering human assistance. Clicked his mandibles in dismissal. Tell the humans to shelter with the civilians, he ordered. This is a matter. We will handle it as we always have. Commander, the human captain insists that her soldiers have relevant combat experience. I have no doubt they do. But this station has shield generators and defensive positions designed by the finest military engineers in the collective. We do not need help from species who cannot even bother to armor their soldiers properly. The communication officer acknowledged and sent the response, turned his attention back to the tactical display and began coordinating his defensive response. He would seal the vulnerable sections, activate all shield generators, and wait for fleet reinforcement. It was the way. He was confident it would be enough. Below in the equipment analysis chamber, Lisa looked up as Park entered with the rest of their squad. His face told her everything she needed to know. Raiders coming, he said. Commander told us to hide with the civilians. And we're going to do that. Smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. We're going to do what we always do. The captain cleared it, full combat load. Lisa nodded and began distributing ammunition from her supply cases. Extra magazines went into every available pocket. Danny, the youngest member of the squad, checked his rifle with nervous hands. First real action, he said quietly. Just remember your training, told him. Stay aggressive, keep moving, and don't run out of ammo. Danny patted the pouches on his vest. 8 magazines, 240 rounds. It felt like a lot until he remembered that the enemy would be shooting back. Those extra pockets better be worth it, he said. Lisa slapped his shoulder as she passed. They always are. The first boarding pods hit the station like metal fists punching through skin. They were designed for exactly this purpose, with hardened that could breach hull plating and cutting torches that burned through inner walls. Within minutes of the initial impact, raiders were pouring into the outer sections of station. Park listened to the reports coming through the station's internal communication system. 3 breach points in the cargo section, 2 more near the engineering access corridors. They were spreading out, establishing positions, and preparing for a systematic push toward the station's valuable core sections. Security is moving to defensive positions, Captain said through his earpiece. They're setting up shield walls at the main corridor junctions. They're giving the raiders time to dig in, said. Every minute they wait, they get stronger. I know, but refused our help. We're supposed to stay in the civilian shelter. Looked at his squad. Danny was checking his weapon for the 3rd time, a nervous habit that would fade with experience. The other 3 Marines, a woman named Grace and 2 men named Pete and Marco Vega, were calm and ready. Lisa had finished distributing ammunition and was now making sure everyone's gear was properly secured. Captain said, requesting permission to assist station security regardless of commander's preferences. There was a pause, was weighing the diplomatic consequences against the tactical situation, knew what her answer would be before she spoke. Permission granted. Try not to cause an interstellar incident. Yes, ma'am. Gestured to his squad and they moved out of the civilian shelter. The corridors were chaos, with station personnel running toward safe zones and security teams rushing toward defensive positions. Nobody tried to stop the humans. Nobody seemed to notice them at all. They reached the first defensive line within minutes. A squad of 8 soldiers had established a shield wall across a wide corridor, their overlapping energy barriers creating an almost solid surface of shimmering blue light. Behind the shields, the soldiers held their weapons ready but did not fire. Approached the squad leader, with rank markings on his carapace. What's the situation? The clicked something that his translator rendered as surprise. Humans, you should be in the shelter. This area is not safe. I can see that. What's ahead? Raiders, perhaps 20. They have established a position at the corridor junction and are preparing to advance. We will hold here until reinforcements arrive. Looked down the corridor. He could see the junction about 100 meters away. They had set up portable barriers and were using them as cover while they organized their forces. More raiders were arriving through the breach point beyond. How long until reinforcements? 40 minutes, perhaps 30 if Commander authorizes emergency deployment. In 40 minutes they'll have 100 raiders dug in at that junction. You'll never push them out. The squad leader made a sound that might have been frustration. We cannot advance against prepared positions. Our shields are designed for defense, not assault. If we move forward, we lose the advantage of our overlapping coverage. Understood the problem. Military doctrine was built around static defense. Their shields worked best when soldiers stood close together in fixed positions. Movement broke the shield wall and exposed individuals to enemy fire. It was an effective strategy against enemies who played the same game. They did not play the same game. They were raiders, used to hitting fast and taking what they wanted before defenders could organize. Against shield walls, they simply waited for openings or brought enough firepower to overwhelm the defenses through sheer volume. It was a slow process, but it worked. We're going forward, said. Stay here and cover our retreat if we need it. The squad leader stared at him with compound eyes that could not blink. You have 6 soldiers with no shields. They have prepared positions in superior numbers. This is suicide. Maybe, said, but probably not. He turned to his squad and gave quick hand signals. They understood immediately. Standard assault formation. Danny and Pete on the left, Grace and Marco on the right. In the center with Lisa slightly behind, ready to redistribute ammunition as needed. Remember, said quietly, speed is survival. Don't stop moving until the shooting stops. If your magazine runs dry, reload on the move. If you can't reload, use your sidearm. If your sidearm is empty, use your knife. but never stopped moving forward. They moved past the defensive line and heard the alien soldiers clicking in what might have been confusion or alarm. He did not look back. Counselor N had followed the humans from the civilian shelter. He knew he should stay behind the defensive lines, but his curiosity was stronger than his caution. He watched from a side corridor as the 6 humans advanced toward the position, and he felt something cold settle in his stomach. The humans were not using cover. They were not moving carefully from position to position the way soldiers did. They were walking forward in the open, their weapons raised, their bodies completely exposed to enemy fire. They saw them coming and opened fire. What happened next would stay in N's memory for the rest of his life. The humans did not dive for cover when the shots came. They did not retreat behind the shield wall. Instead, they began shooting back while continuing to advance. Their weapons produced a continuous roar of sound, a wall of noise that filled the corridor and made his antennae ache. Danny was firing in controlled bursts, his rifle steady despite his youth. When his magazine emptied, his hands moved in a blur, dropping the spent magazine and inserting a fresh one from the pouches on his vest. He never stopped walking forward. He never stopped shooting. Grace had moved to the left side of the corridor, using the angle to catch raiders who tried to lean out from their barriers. Each time one appeared, she fired 3 quick shots and moved to a new position before they could return fire. They were accustomed to enemies who hid behind shields and shot back carefully. They were not prepared for enemies who charged directly at them while laying down continuous fire. The raiders began to fall back, abandoning their barriers and retreating toward the breach point. Push the advance harder. Every step forward was a step that could not recover. Every second of pressure was a second the raiders spent running instead of shooting. The pouches on his vest grew lighter as he burned through ammunition, but Lisa was there, pressing fresh magazines into his hand without him having to ask. The corridor junction was theirs within 3 minutes. The barriers were abandoned, scattered with dropped weapons, and the bodies of raiders who had been too slow to retreat did not stop to count them. He signaled his squad to establish a perimeter and began assessing the next objective. Behind them and stood frozen in the corridor. He had just watched 6 humans with no shields and minimal armor walk through enemy fire and take a position that 20 soldiers would have needed an hour to capture. They had done it through aggression alone, through the sheer overwhelming volume of their attack. He finally understood what Lisa had meant. Those extra pockets were not for carrying ammunition, they were for carrying victory. The squad leader approached him with slow, uncertain steps. "Counselor, what just happened?" And watched the humans reload their weapons and check their remaining supplies. Danny was grinning despite the sweat on his face. Grace was already scanning for the next threat. Park was speaking quietly with Lisa about ammunition distribution. "I think," and said slowly, "we are learning why humans do not bother with armor." The battle had become a running fight through the outer sections of station. Squad pushed from junction to junction, never giving the time to establish new defensive positions. The raiders were fast and brutal, but they had never faced an enemy that was faster and more brutal than they were. Lisa kept count of ammunition as they moved. She had distributed 800 rounds among the squad before the fighting started. They had burned through nearly half of that in the first engagement. At this rate, they would run dry before reaching the main breach point. She said during a brief pause, "We need to slow down or find more ammo." He nodded without looking at her. His eyes were fixed on the corridor ahead, where shadows moved and voices hissed in the language. "Any supplies on the raiders we dropped. Different caliber, won't fit our weapons." "Then we keep moving, slower rate of fire but don't stop the pressure." They advanced again, and this time forced himself to be more conservative. Single shots instead of bursts, careful aim instead of suppressive volume. It felt wrong, like trying to run with weights on his legs, but he trusted Lisa's count. Danny was struggling with the change of pace. He had been taught to pour fire onto targets, and holding back went against his training. His shots came in ragged groups, not quite controlled but not quite automatic either. Said between shots, "Breathe, one target at a time, make each round count." "Sergeant, there's a lot of them." "There's less every time you hit one, focus." Danny took a breath and steadied his aim. His next shot dropped a raider mid-stride, then another, then a third. He was finding his rhythm, the focused precision that separated experienced soldiers from fresh ones. Grace moved up on the left, her rifle speaking in sharp single reports. She had always been the best marksman in the squad, and now that skill was keeping them alive. Each shot found a target, and each target stopped moving. Marco and Pete worked the right side of the corridor in tandem. One would fire while the other advanced, then they would switch. It was a dance they had practiced 1,000 times, and it worked even when ammunition was precious. Counselor and followed at a distance, recording everything with his personal device. He had sent his initial observations to Commander, but he was not sure the Commander understood what he was seeing. The humans were not just fighting differently than they were fighting as if the concept of defense had never occurred to them at all. They reached the secondary junction and called a halt. Ahead was the main breach point, where the largest boarding pod had torn through the station's hull. Through the jagged opening, he could see more raiders arriving from their ships. Dozens of them, maybe more. Count, he asked Lisa. 212 rounds total, 35 per person roughly. Did the math in his head. 35 rounds each against 40 or 50 enemies in a fortified position. It was not enough, not even close. Options. Lisa opened one of her many pouches and pulled out something that made smile. 2 fragmentation grenades, traded from an armory officer who had been curious about human weapons. Forgot I had these, she said. You're a beautiful person, Lisa. I know. Gathered the squad and laid out the plan. The grenades would go first, thrown into the breach point to scatter the raiders and destroy their cover. Then the squad would advance in a wedge formation, concentrating their fire on anyone still standing. It would be fast and violent and over in seconds, one way or another. Once we're in, don't stop shooting until nothing moves, said. We won't get a second chance at this. Danny's hands were shaking slightly as he checked his magazine one more time. 28 rounds. It seemed like so few against so many. But the pouches on his vest held 3 more magazines, and he remembered what Lisa had told him during training. Every pocket is a second chance. Took 1 grenade and gave the other to Pete, who had the best throwing arm. They moved to the edge of the corridor, using the corner for cover while they prepared the throw. On 3 said, 1, 2, 3. Both grenades flew through the air in perfect arcs. They disappeared into the breach point, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the explosions came, twin blasts of sound and fire that filled the corridor with smoke and screaming. Go, shouted, and the squad moved. They hit the breach point like a wave of thunder. The grenades had done their work, scattering the formation and destroying the barriers they had been setting up. Raiders stumbled through the smoke, disoriented and wounded, and the humans cut them down without mercy. Danny fired until his magazine clicked empty, then dropped it and slammed in a fresh one without breaking stride. He was moving on instinct now, his body remembering what his mind was too busy to think about. Target, shoot, move. Target, shoot, move. Grace found a cluster of raiders trying to regroup near the breach opening. She put 5 rounds into them in 3 seconds, then pivoted to engage another group on her flank. Her vest pouches were getting lighter with each engagement, but she did not let herself think about what would happen when they were empty. Marco took a hit. The round caught him in the left arm, spinning him sideways and nearly dropping him. Pete grabbed his vest and kept him upright while firing one-handed at the shooter. The raider fell with 2 holes in his chest. I'm good, Marco said through gritted teeth. His arm was bleeding badly, but the wound was not fatal. He shifted his rifle to his right hand and kept fighting. Lisa appeared at his side, pressing a bandage from her vest pouch against the wound while still holding her own weapon ready. Keep pressure on this. Don't die. Wasn't planning on it. Push deeper into the breach point, stepping over fallen raiders and broken equipment. They were in full retreat now, those who could still run scrambling back toward their boarding pod. He let them go. Chasing fleeing enemies was a good way to walk into an ambush, and his squad was too low on ammunition to take that risk. Secure the position, he ordered. Danny, Pete watched the pod entrance. Grace, Marco cover the corridor behind us. Lisa, how are we looking? Lisa did a quick count. 46 rounds between all of us, plus sidearms. It was not enough to hold against a serious counterattack, but looking at the bodies scattered around the breach point, thought maybe they would not be eager to try again. Counselor and emerged from the smoke, his carapace dusty and his compound eyes wide with something between terror and wonder. He looked at the human squad, bloodied and tired and low on ammunition, standing in the ruins of a position that should have required 100 soldiers to take. How many were there? He asked. Shrugged, lost count, 30, 40. 37, Lisa said. I count everything. And looked at the 6 humans with their nearly empty pouches and their smoking weapons. And how many rounds did you have when you started? 412. The counselor did the math. 11 rounds per enemy, against prepared positions, with no shields and minimal armor. That's impossible, he said quietly. Smiled, though there was no humor in it. Not impossible, just expensive, and we're about to be broke. He checked his own pouches. 2 magazines left, 60 rounds. Somewhere on the station more raiders were still fighting. The battle was not over yet. But as he looked at his squad, tired and wounded and ready to keep going, he felt something like pride. They had carried enough ammunition to make a difference, and they had spent it well. That was all any soldier could ask for. The extra pockets had been worth it. They always were. The final push came from an unexpected direction. Captain arrived at the breach point with a squad of security forces following behind her. The alien soldiers moved carefully, their shields raised, their weapons ready. They looked at the carnage around them with compound eyes that could not show emotion but somehow managed to convey shock. Sergeant Park said, "Status report." "Breach point secured, Captain. We're low on ammunition and Marco took a hit, but we're still functional. What's the situation elsewhere?" "Forces have contained the other breach points. They are pulling back across the station." Looked at the bodies scattered around the opening in the hull. "Looks like you convinced them to leave this one early." Nodded. He was too tired for pride. "We need resupply if you want us to keep fighting." "No need. Commander is finally taking this seriously. He's deploying the station's full security complement to sweep the remaining raiders. Our job is done." The squad leader stepped forward, his 4 arms moving in a gesture did not recognize. "Sergeant Park, I watched your advance through the corridors. I have never seen anything like it." "Just doing our job." "No," the was insistent. "What you did was not normal combat. You walked through enemy fire as if it did not exist. You attacked prepared positions with no protective systems. You should all be dead." Looked at his squad. Danny was sitting against a wall, finally allowing himself to feel the exhaustion. Grace was checking Marco's wound while Lisa the bandage with practiced hands. Pete was watching the breach opening, his rifle still raised despite having only a few rounds left. "We've got good training," said, "and good equipment." "Your equipment has no shields, almost no armor, nothing but weapons and ammunition." "That's the good equipment I'm talking about." They made a sound that the translator rendered as frustrated confusion. He did not understand and was too tired to explain it again. Some things could not be taught through words. They had to be shown. Hours later, the battle was over. The remaining raiders had retreated to their ships, and weapons platforms had destroyed 3 of the fleeing vessels before they could escape. The station was damaged but intact, and casualties had been far lighter than in previous raids. In the medical bay, Marco lay on a bed while an alien medical device scanned his arm wound. The doctor assured him the injury was clean and would heal well. Danny sat nearby, finally processing everything that had happened. "Hey Marco," Danny said quietly, "you ever think about how crazy it is what we do?" "What do you mean?" "I mean they have shields that can stop almost anything. Energy barriers that make them basically invincible. And we just walk into combat with some plates in our vests and a bunch of extra magazines." Marco flexed his wounded arm carefully. "Does seem kind of stupid when you put it that way. But it works. That's what I don't understand. It shouldn't work, but it does. It works because we don't give the enemy time to shoot at us." Lisa had entered the medical bay with fresh bandages. "Shields are reactive. They protect you from attacks. Ammunition is proactive. It stops attacks from happening." "That sounds like something you put on a poster," Danny said. "That's because it's true and it's simple. Good truths usually are." In the station's command center, Commander reviewed the battle data with a growing sense of discomfort. The human Marines had taken the main breach point with 6 soldiers and no shields. They had killed or wounded 37 raiders while taking only 1 casualty themselves. The mathematics of it did not make sense according to military doctrine. High Examiner stood beside him, watching the same data scroll across the display. "I told you," said quietly, "their equipment is not designed for protection. It is designed for carrying the means to end battles quickly." I dismissed your report, admitted. I thought it was exaggeration or misunderstanding. I did as well at first, but I have watched them fight now. They do not defend, Commander. They only attack, and their attacks are so fast and so violent that defense becomes unnecessary. Was silent for a long moment. His compound eyes studied the tactical replay of the human assault on the breach point. 6 soldiers moving forward through enemy fire, never stopping, never hesitating. 46 seconds from first engagement to secured position. We must learn from them, he said finally. Request an extended exchange program. I want officers training with human forces. You wish to adopt their methods? No, our biology and psychology are too different. We could never fight the way they do, but we must understand them. A species capable of this kind of warfare could be the most valuable ally in the galaxy or the most terrifying enemy. Nodded slowly. I will make the arrangements. Captain found counselor and on the observation deck, watching the damaged sections of the station being sealed by repair drones. The counselor turned as she approached, his antennae twitching in greeting. Your people performed remarkably, and said, Commander has asked me to convey his formal gratitude. We were happy to help, that's what allies do. I must ask you something, Captain, something that has been troubling me since I watched your soldiers fight. Leaned against the window, railing, and waited. Your species has no natural weapons, and said, no claws, no fangs, no armor. You are soft and fragile compared to most intelligent species, and yet you fight as if you are immortal. Where does this courage come from? Thought about the question for a while before answering. It's not courage, or at least not the way most species think of courage. We're not brave because we don't fear death. We're aggressive because we've always feared it. I don't understand. Back on our we were prey animals, everything wanted to eat us. We survived by learning that running away just meant being chased and being chased meant being caught. So we stopped running. We turned around and we fought, even when we were terrified, even when we were outmatched, because fighting gave us a chance. Running just made us tired before we died. And considered this. So your aggression is a survival mechanism, a response to fear rather than its absence. Exactly. Every human soldier is scared when they go into battle, but we learned a long time ago that fear can make you run or it can make you fight. Running feels safer, but fighting actually is safer. So we carry extra ammunition instead of extra armor, because armor helps you survive longer. Ammunition helps you end the threat. It is a brutal philosophy. The universe is a brutal place. We just adapted to fit it. In the examination chamber where everything had started, High Examiner made his final entry in the military archives. He typed slowly, choosing each word with care. Human defensive equipment is not designed for defense. It is designed to carry the means of ending threats before defense becomes necessary. Their soldiers wear minimal armor not because they are reckless, but because they have determined that offensive capability provides better protection than physical barriers. This philosophy is fundamentally different from doctrine and challenges many assumptions about optimal combat methodology. Recommendation: further study required. Human military cooperation should be pursued with maximum priority. A species capable of this level of aggression could reshape the balance of power in known space. Warning: do not mistake human friendliness for weakness. Their soft bodies and warm smiles conceal a predator species that has perfected the art of violence. They do not wear heavy armor because they do not plan to be shot at for long. They do not carry shields because they expect to kill their enemies before their enemies can kill them. They carry extra pockets for ammunition, and that, I now understand, is the most terrifying thing about them. Saved the entry and closed his display. Somewhere on the station, the human Marines were resting and resupplying, filling those many pockets with fresh rounds. He thought about Lisa laughing when he asked about the defensive rating of human equipment, and he finally understood the joke. The armor was never the point. The armor was never going to save them. Only victory could do that, and victory lived in those extra pockets, waiting to be spent one round at a time.